Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Monday. It's Monday, and it's 3 to 4. And I have Marco Mangelsdorf on the line using Skype audio from the Big Island, from Kona. Marco, thank you again for joining us.
Oh, fantastic to be again with you, Jay. Thank you.
Marco is one of our favorite repeating guests. He's an expert in solar. He runs Provision Solar. He's had time all over the map on solar. He's seen it emerge. He's seen it do its thing, and he watches it as nobody else does. So, Marco, there's so much happening in solar. Solar is so central. You know, we had this Clean Energy Day program last Tuesday, July 22nd, at Laniakea Women's Y downtown. It was really interesting. There were 30 speakers. It lasted all day. A lot of it was transportation, but usually, and no exception this time, a lot of it is always solar, because solar is central. Maybe that's the name of our show. Solar is central, no matter what you do. So, you know, one thing I caught is that there was an article in the paper over the weekend about the Marines and Kaneohe Marine Base, and now we were going to have ocean energy at Kaneohe Marine Base. And I wonder, you know, does that change your mind in terms of the relevance of solar to the Clean Energy Initiative?
As far as the Department of Defense moving forward with these rather large projects?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it shows that under President Obama, there has been a bigger, bolder push compared to his predecessors in terms of, shall we say, greenifying and making more green the Department of Defense and the branches of the military. So this, to me, is just part of that overall push, because if you look at the total amount of energy consumed by our branches of the military and Department of Defense, it's a rather staggering amount. So if DoD can become more green, especially in places where electricity costs are as high as they are in the islands, then it makes a lot of sense.
You know, Cynthia Thielen has been advocating for ocean energy for a long time, all kinds of ocean energy, and there's been discussion about it for a long time. But I can remember, you know, early on in clean energy, I want to say this would be in the early 2000s, I mean, before the Clean Energy Initiative, I ran into a guy who was doing research on ocean energy devices in Southern California, who was visiting here. And he told me there's a big, almost impossible problem, and that is, you know, corrosion. It's the same problem that they have in OTEC. And so OTEC is stuck, and, you know, for my money too, ocean energy is stuck, because you can't have energy producing devices that rust and corrode, or that need to be, you know, replaced and replenished and refinished all the time. It just gets to be too expensive. And as a result, you know, I'm thinking the field has narrowed. And these guys, I mean, they may spend some money on ocean energy, and they may spend some money on OTEC, but the fact is that solar is perfected. And I don't know why we still believe that we should use every player in the array. We should focus in on the ones that really work. What do you think about that?
Well, I respect Cynthia Thielen's long-time commitment to renewable energy, and she has certainly been one of the bigger, if not the biggest, cheerleaders in the state regarding ocean energy. And I can't claim to be all that much of an expert on it. There are parts of the world where ocean energy is harvested, whether it's tidal, whether it's swells going up and down, causing hydraulic pistons essentially to move and create energy. But there's been some preliminary pilot work done with both HECO and with the military out here. But in terms of the near-term potential, as far as megawatts worth of power generation, it's I think by most observers less available, less practical, less cost-effective at this point compared to other forms of renewable energy, principally solar and wind, which there's quite a bit of both in the state.
Yeah, I guess we're in the same place on this. You know, one type of renewable that came up in the, but not much, in the Clean Energy Day program. And by the way, the audio, we actually broadcasted the audio of that entire program, and we recorded it, and it is on YouTube right now. There's like 6 or 7 hours of it. And if anyone is of a mind to listen to the Clean Energy 2014 program, which took place on July 22nd, and wants to spend all day listening, you can listen. And it's very interesting, some of it, because people were really letting their hair down. They were making very edgy statements. It was as edgy a Clean Energy, Pacific, rather, Energy Forum program as I've ever seen because of that. Anyway, geothermal. And geothermal is there. Geothermal could be multiples of what it is today. Geothermal could, take the Big Island to 100%. It's firm, it's dispatchable. The Big Island's at 50% now. It could go to 100. How does this change? I mean, assuming you got by all the cultural resistance and the activism around geothermal, wouldn't geothermal be even better than solar on the Big Island because it's there?
Well, Jay, I'm going to take issue with that for the following reason, because, and I think this is a very plausible perspective for HELCO to have, is that the geothermal potential on the Big Island is most proven in the Puna area. There's been some research on the Hualalai volcano as well over on the west side, but that's nothing compared to what actually has been done in terms of tapping down into Madame Pele in the Puna area. And that is a geologically very active seismic zone. And it does not make sense to me that any utility company would essentially put all, or let alone the vast majority of their eggs, so to speak, in that one single basket, because if there were to be something catastrophic that would happen in that area with wells to blow out or something more dramatic, then the utility company would go down, essentially the grid would go down for pretty much the entire island if they were to go to 80, 90, let alone 100% of geothermal. So I don't think that's a wise thing to do. Governor Abercrombie was here a month or so ago, incredibly supportive of geothermal, which of course is nice to have political elected leaders in favor of renewable energy sources, but I think that he fundamentally misses the point that it is not a good thing to put too many eggs in the basket, and that the best strategy is to move forward on multiple fronts and multiple locations, at least on this island, in terms of developing renewable energy resources, which is what HELCO, in fact, has been doing over the past years.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. I mean, it's interesting that we have scientists from SOAS, the School of Ocean Earth Science and Technology at the university, and we've had a number of volcanologists visiting the show, and they're working on ways to predict the seismic events. They're working on ways to, predict how all of that works, and, what the process is, and what the cause and effect is. But you're right in the sense that they can predict it, but if there were going to be some seismic event that would damage the a geothermal facility in Puna, what can you do? It's sitting pretty for any kind of event like that, and it would shut it down. And if it was yielding, for example, 50% of all the power on the Big Island, that would be the end of power on the Big Island, at least for a while. So I would have to join you in your concern. We may know more now, but it's still unpredictable, or at least it's still unreliable in the long term that something is likely to happen because it's an active seismic area. So that leaves us with solar as the primary renewable tool, really, in the renewable department. I don't get the feeling that biofuel is that much of the pie. And I guess you have some wind over there, but I'm not sure that wind is as popular as solar. Nobody opposes solar as an environmental issue, although I suppose you could gin up some reasons to oppose it. But the fact is that everybody seems to be behind solar. And that means that we could run the state on solar as long as we could find storage. And so the Energy Day discussion on July 22nd did include a lot of stuff about storage. And in fact, the HELCO speaker, Jay Ignacio, the president of HELCO, did speak about it. They all spoke about storage. And there's been talk about there's a French company that's installing storage. I don't know if you saw this storage facility, batteries on Kauai now. Kauai is focusing on storage, and so this is just an element that makes solar, sort of the candidate for the leading renewable going forward. If you put those two together, it's an unbeatable combination. Yeah.
Well, in fact, I think that is a very key part of the puzzle, energy storage. And I was speaking to one of my HECO friends not too long ago on this subject in terms of trying to get a very clear idea, or as clear as I can, in terms of the mitigating possibilities, the strategies, and the tools that the utility companies here in the state can implement, not in the far distant future, but in a relatively short time frame, as in the next 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. And I'm feeling more encouraged at this point after receiving this new information of where some of the directions are that the HECO companies are pursuing, and energy storage is a really important aspect of it. And I'll share with you one of my takeaways in a recent conversation is we have on Oahu, somewhere around 250 megawatts of nameplate PV generating capacity, 250. And the peak demand that HECO sees, which typically takes place sometime in the month of September, which coincides with, say, a higher air conditioning load in that time of the year, is about 1,200 megawatts. Mm-hmm. 1,200 megawatts, and the system peak generating capacity for HECO, including not only their own generation capacity but also independent power producers like H-Power, is about 1,600. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale. So about 250 megawatts worth of generating capacity peak from solar, 1,200 megawatts of max demand was registered in the past 12 months or so. And but when HECO can deploy a modest amount of utility scale storage at a number of locations in their transmission and distribution system, that will, at least on paper, likely allow them to accommodate substantially more PV than those 250 current megawatts either installed or essentially in the queue. And that's, of course, music to all our ears, those of us who are in favor of solar and those of us who are in the business of installing it, selling it, and installing it. So the energy storage on the utility side of the meter is something they're actively pursuing. And, of course, KIUC is setting a fantastic example already on the ground as they're installing additional megawatts of solar. And the HECO companies are also actively looking at energy storage on the customer side of the meter, which, of course, is going to be on a much smaller scale and allow HECO, MECO to essentially bank solar power produced during daytime minimum load hours, which are typically between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., which, of course, are peak solar generating hours, and essentially allow that solar power produced during that 4-hour chunk in the midday period to feed into the grid during the peak demand period, which is typically in the 5 to 7 range, 5 to 7 p.m. range.
This is all sort of forming up, Marco. It's the pieces seem to be coming together. And, you and I, we tracked on this, and I see the outlines even from our own discussion of where it's going to go. Anyway, that's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar in Hilo. This is Think Tech Hawaii. We're talking about PV in Hawaii, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, this is Keli'i Akina. It's my privilege to be the host of Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako, what does that mean? Well, many people have heard of Epule Kako, let's pray together. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Let's work together to build a better economy, government, and society. And every week, Monday from 2 to 3 o'clock, you will see movers and shakers and other people who are working together to build a better economy, government, and society. Again, I'm Keli'i Akina on the Ehana Kako weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. Aloha. See you here Mondays 2 to 3.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Marco Mangelsdorf, who joins us from time to time, and especially today. He's from Provision Solar in Hilo. And we're here on Think Tech Talks. We're talking about PV in Hawaii. We're trying to track on all the elements in play these days around solar, which seems to be the center of the channel. So you take all that together and you get that RFP that Hawaiian Electric is trying to bring in more and more solar, rather storage, a couple of 100 megawatts maybe, and then there'll be another one after that. Then what you get is an open channel for solar. You get a whole new market really for solar. Of course, you have a whole new obligation for smart grid, because that has to come with it. You can't just have the storage and the solar. You got to build the grid up to connect the two and to make all of that work. But if you do that, spend the money, you're going to have a transformation of the system. Clearly, you won't need as much generating capacity. You won't need as much fossil fuel. You'll need more solar. You're going to spend more money on infrastructure. It has profound implications for rates and for the future of the utility. And I might add, Marco, that there was a lot of talk about the future of the utility at this program on July 22nd. That alone would be worth listening to the whole tape of what they said. But what do you think? What does it mean in the short term and the long term? How is this combination of new possibilities going to change our energy world here?
I think it's very exciting, and I think it's a bit too early to tell. I think we're very much in the thick of things, and there's going to be a tremendous amount of attention paid to the documents which are going to be coming from HECO, submitted to the PUC in about a month from now, in response to the 4 orders and decision and orders that the PUC publicized in late April. So I have no doubt that the HECO folks have been putting a tremendous amount of very thoughtful time, energy, and effort into addressing the many, many points that the PUC brought out at the end of April. I feel very optimistic that the mid to long term that the state will be as electricity or as independent as possible in terms of electrical power generation, independent from needing imported fuels to come from thousands of miles away on ships and barges. But as we've talked about before, it's the transportation sector, both in terms of inter-island airfare, which gobbles up a very large chunk of overall transportation energy needs in the state, as well as ground transportation. So I think we're definitely on a good track and on an accelerated track in terms of electric power generation, but it's the transportation sector which is really the sticking point, and I think it's going to be a substantial period of time, as in not in the next 1 to 5 years, but probably decades. There's going to be a shift from tootling around in fossil fuel burning vehicles and switching to electric vehicles or hydrogen. So I'm much more optimistic on the electrical power generation side than I am on the transportation.
I would join you in that. Last year, Clean Energy Day was dedicated to transportation, and it was really hard to get your hand on what is going to happen. This year, there was a very significant panel involving the Federal Department of Transportation and the state, which had not appeared last year. The State Department of Transportation came down and talked about it. And then we had Joanne Yukimura, who's a great speaker from Kauai. She came down and talked about it. But I join you. I don't have a whole lot of optimism about how that can move forward. I mean, for one thing, I think it's clear that people don't want to give their cars up. And these government officials are operating on the assumption that they can somehow create an environment where they really must give their cars up, and there'll be so many incentives and alternative possibilities that people will give their cars up. I think in large part that's pie in the sky. If I have $70,000 into my tinted window SUV with a television inside, I'm not about to leave that in a driveway. I'm gonna take advantage of my investment. I'm gonna be driving everywhere, and of course that means congestion everywhere, which accelerates the use of fossil fuel even more. So that's a whole new issue, and we should talk about how one affects the other. But for the moment, let's talk about the new grid with more solar, with more smart grid, more storage, and all that. And so my question to you is, everybody is talking about HECO's response to the PUC orders, including the PUC, including HECO. And whenever you talk to any side of it, everyone says that HECO's working day and night on this. They're going to try to do their best work on responding. They're going to try to, they sort of have a rap for being old-fashioned and all. They're going to try to be creative. They're going to try to address all these issues. They're sympathetic with the essential problem. They're sympathetic with the PUC's desire to clear it up, and they're going to come up with something. But nobody says what that might be. What do you think it might be?
What they're going to be submitting to the PUC in a month or so?
Yeah.
I think it's going to make for very interesting reading, and I think they clearly have. I think they got the message loud and clear even prior to the end of April and the reports, the decision orders by the PUC.
This has been coming for a while. Yeah.
But I think they have it more clear than ever, more loud and clear than ever, as of those documents at the end of April, and I think their response is going to be multi-fold in terms of the I don't want to say solutions, because I think that perhaps leads to kind of false raised expectations, but improvements and fixes to essential bottlenecks that have been identified in terms of the state moving forward more rapidly with distributed generation, in this case in the form of rooftop PV, because utility scale PV in terms of multi-megawatts at a location, I think is more prone to a techno fix in terms of utility scale battery storage, and the utility being more in direct control of a multi-megawatt utility PV farm. It's the distributed generation on people's homes, on business roofs, that has been more of a challenge because of its very nature, which is in fact distributed. So I'm hopeful and optimistic, and do believe that they are going to propose a number of fixes and improvements that will, hopefully the short term, allow a lot of folks who would like to go PV, who may be delayed in going PV because of grid penetration issues, that it will allow them to move forward. And it's going to take place both on the utility side in terms of them replacing equipment and modifying their grid, as well as inverters, which is the device that changes the direct current electricity to alternating current and feeds into your home distribution panel, and then can thereby feed back into the grid. That these inverters will come with new programming that allow them to be more quick and nimble in terms of dealing with transient fault conditions on the utility side, and allow them to ride through these faults, and allow them to be more responsive. So again, you mentioned the phrase smart grid, and I think these are parts of that equation. The utilities taking efforts, taking measures on their side, and also working with inverter manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, to redo their equipment, reprogram their equipment in order to allow for substantially more PV.
Yeah, I join you in that. I mean, making a list of the things that I think they will do. I mean, why not? Why can't we speculate? Let's speculate. So, I mean, I think they're going to focus on this whole issue about PV, and they're going to incentivize more PV. They're going to make a procedure to get connected, the whole connectivity thing that's going to be really simple or even assumed. They're going to take the laboring oar on building storage, but I think they'll allow people to put their own storage in. But they'll put a lot more storage in. That'll be their big contribution. And smart grid, demand response, which was a term that was used over and over again in the July 22nd meeting about demand response, essentially part of the smart grid. I think they'll do plenty of that. They'll have to find a way to pay for it. My guess is they're going to seek changes in the way net energy metering happens, to make it more democratic, if you will, for people who don't have, PV. They're going to look for a different rate structure, I bet. I mean, I think they should, because it's all changing. I think they're going to go for more of their own PV, because that's smart. They got to stay in business. They got to stay relevant. It's nice to say that they'll be just a transmission company, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to just be a transmission company. And if you're a utility in business and you have stockholders and expectations for dividends and whatnot, you still have to be part of the big solution, and that means to actually buy and install storage and be a storage company, and that way they don't have problems with connectivity. And I think they'll have to find ways to make all of this reliable. So that's part of being a utility and making themselves relevant. I don't think they'll be talking about ocean energy. I don't think they'll be talking about geothermal very much. I don't think they'll be talking a lot about biofuels very much. They might talk about wind, but I think their solution, as they're fashioning it right now, as we speak, will be largely about PV and all the accoutrements for PV and all the legal structures around PV, and it will be transformational. And that's really an interesting result after all the backing and filling with the integrated resource plan failure, with all the contention and the arguments and the nastiness, really unnecessarily, I think. That will be the solution that finally emerges. Even, you wouldn't call it a consensus, but you also wouldn't call it governmental leadership. I think it's leadership forced on HECO, and HECO can now be the leader, must now be the leader. Those are my thoughts. Your response?
Well, yes, I mean, and just based on Siegel's report in the Advertiser, and I had a chance to actually download that report from IREC, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and the state of Hawaii was #1 in the country last year in terms of per capita.
You accept
PV.
that?
And yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. And I mean, one cannot plausibly make an argument that the one out of 50 states in the country that has the highest amount of per capita PV, that somehow the utility companies have been dragging their heels and been obstructionists to more PV. I mean, it just logically, it doesn't make sense. You can argue that, they should be going faster, they should be going further, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. Easy enough to say, but I mean, the data, which I'm really driven by when I do my reports and analyses and writings, the data, I think, say a lot more than the shoulda, woulda, coulda. And they deserve a lot of credit for that. Do they have a ways to go? Of course they do. But I mean, you don't get to be number one in the country in terms of per capita PV by being the troglodyte obstructionist like some of their more vehement critics accuse them of being.
Let's take a break, Marco. We need to take just a few seconds break. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, ProVision Solar in Hilo. Joins us by Skype from Hilo. This is Think Tech Talks. We're talking about PV in Hawaii, as Marco and I do from time to time. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. Come and watch Catching Up with Kaka'ako every Wednesday, 3 to 4 p.m. We'll introduce you to developers, to residents, to designers and architects, officials, and regular people, all of whom are involved in the development of Kaka'ako, who care about it passionately, and who are part of the community that will ultimately live, work, learn, and play there. Come and see Catching Up in Kaka'ako, 3 to 4 p.m. every Wednesday. Thanks. I'll see you there. Okay, we're back. We're live with Marco Mangelsdorf. ProVision Solar joins us by Skype from Hilo. We're so happy to have this conversation. Somehow it provokes thoughts that at least haven't come to my mind before. Let's go to the main thrust of our conversation, PV in Hawaii, Marco. There was this article, and it's in a way it's a little surprising, but the Isles take the lead in capacity of PV power. So that is something. We have achieved something. Maybe, with all the contention, we weren't aware that we were achieving something. And it somehow gives us an optimism to say, well, yeah, we have something going here. So what did the report say exactly?
Well, it's essentially an analysis of what took place across the United States as far as solar goes in 2013. And what Dave Siegel wrote on in his piece in the Star Advertiser today was the news that in 2013, Hawaii had more per capita PV than anywhere else in the country. We were number 2 in 2012 behind Arizona, but this past full year in 2013, we hit the number 1 position. And it also noted, for example, that about 75% of the grid-tied PV system capacity installed last year was concentrated in 3 states only, Hawaii not being one of them, given our small size. But those 3 states were California, that's not a surprise. Arizona, that's not too much of a surprise. But the surprise was number 3 was North Carolina, interestingly enough.
Well, with all of that, I mean, now you've been doing data analysis for a long time, and finding that by way of the building permits on PV installations, especially in Oahu, there's been a steady and notable decline, which my recollection is the very last time you did that was not that long ago. You found a continuation of that decline. So here we are declining, and I wonder if you can rectify that. We have a decline, and yet we're first in the nation. What does this mean?
Well, in 2012 and 2013 were monster years for PV going online, being sold and installed in the state of Hawaii essentially 2011, 2012, 2013 were the big-time boom years, with things peaking in 2012 and 2013. And my data, as I've been looking most closely at PV permit data for the island of Oahu from the City and County of Honolulu Department of Permitting and Planning, I did a piece last week where I was looking at the first 6 months of 2014, comparing it to the first 6 months of 2013 and the first 6 months of 2012. And the figures, 2014 compared to 2013, had the overall total project value as stated on the permits for the first 6 months of this year compared to the same period last year down just a little bit over 50%, as in 50%.
That's serious.
And I decided to reach out to a number of my PV colleagues. I contacted about 20 of them, essentially all on the top 20 list in terms of permit pullers, so to speak. And I got a response rate of about 50%, and I asked them 2 simple questions. I said, number 1, what's responsible for the decline, this significant decline, which they've experienced, because there wasn't a single PV company in the top 15 that had not experienced a decline year to year except for one, which was flat in terms of wasn't up, wasn't down this year compared to last year. And all of my respondents pointed at Hawaiian Electric as being the reason why numbers were down, as in interconnection issues and challenges and delays. So, the fingers are pointing back at Hawaiian Electric as being the root cause of the decline, and of course that, amongst other things, is prompting Hawaiian Electric to do what they're doing now to try to come up with mitigating means to be able to deal with that. So, my observation in that piece was that as far as the next 6 months go, the balance of this year, I really don't see any tangible improvement. I mean, last month, for example, there were less than 500 PV permits pulled on Oahu, and that's compared to the peak month of October 2012, there were over 2,400 permits. So if you do the math, that comes out to somewhere 20+% only of the same number of permits last year compared to the peak month of October 2012. And last month was also the fewest number of PV permits pulled in the past 2.5 years. So I think it's unlikely that those numbers are going to get much better in the balance of the year, and that's going to be difficult, increasingly difficult for those companies who were enjoying a much higher revenue stream not that long ago.
Well, we've talked about this before. Did the people you contact, I mean, everybody seems to point the finger at HECO and say it's the interconnection delay and denial that makes it hard for consumers to go ahead and make deals. It's just they don't have any predictability, any assurance that they'll be able to get what they want. So what about the other notion, which you and I have talked about before, and that is that the low-hanging fruit has been picked? That only, you may have a lot more houses that theoretically could use PV, but you only have so many consumers who are willing to pay for it, willing to go that step, willing to so bunch up their income, so to speak, and actually get into it, take the leap, and maybe the low-hanging fruit is gone now. Maybe the rest of the the homeowners, consumer group is more reluctant, just as a matter of not taking the risk. What do you think? Anybody say that? Did anybody tell you that?
No, not in those exact words, although I did have a number of my colleagues who essentially were stating that in their opinion, we as an industry will not go back to the boom days of 2012, for example, and that with the implication being that there are, shall I say, structural adjustments that need to take place in the expectations of companies like mine and others as far as what is a reasonable volume to be expected going out, and have we hit a plateau because we have now roughly 12% of all homeowners who have solar PV? Is that what the market will bear at this point? Putting aside what limitations there are in terms of the grid being able to accommodate PV, but where is kind of the natural plateau? Is it 20% or 1 out of 5 homes? Is it more than that? Is it less than that? And I honestly don't have an answer. I mean, there are plenty of homeowners who will never go PV, and that's just the way it is. They're just not interested. Still, like there are plenty of homeowners who don't have solar hot water. So I'm not comfortable in speculating where that kind of natural plateau is in our state, where we're likely to still have high electric rates, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, what is to be expected in terms of how many homes on a percentage basis in the state is that kind of max threshold for adopting PV?
Well, I also want to ask you how this decline, which is perceptible, and significant, has affected. We talked earlier about how this reflects consolidation, and some companies, who had come from roofing maybe or plumbing, and now were involved in PV. They were going to go back to roofing and plumbing. We talked about how mainland companies had come in and they had great financing arrangements, and that they could outsell and outperform a lot of local companies. So they went right to the top of the heap in terms of the sales. How has the industry changed? How will it change, assuming that nothing much changes in the marketplace between now and the end of the year? What do you see?
So three things. One, there's downsizing taking place. Employees are being let go because volume has reduced, revenues have reduced. Two, you have some companies that are trying to expand their product offerings and their service offerings, branching out, let's say, to more traditional HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and other niche markets, which is a way of trying to increase revenue by selling different services and products. And third, I think there's going to an effect is going to be that with some of these larger integrators who have thousands, without exaggeration, thousands of photovoltaic systems in the field, as their revenue has shrunk and will continue to likely be on the low end, they're in kind of the double squeeze of the vice, as I think of it. Where on one side of the vice is reduced revenue from new sales, and the other side of the vice is more and more expense and liability over time in servicing, maintaining, and repairing existing systems out there amongst the thousands that these larger firms have installed. And companies to offer 10-year warranties, I think a lot of these companies really have no clue what kind of liability they're taking on when they're saying, we'll guarantee our system for 10 years, we will come back and do routine maintenance once a year, we will clean your solar modules for you on a regular basis. That is a cash drain, and the larger your fleet, so to speak, the more that cash drain is going to be. So I think it's going to be really difficult for a number of players in the field to weather this storm that we're experiencing in the turbulent skies above us and the choppy seas that we're paddling across, to mix my metaphors.
That's really totally mixed. Anyway, we talked before, and I wrote an article about the GEMS program, which would allow for government loans of funds raised by ratepayer-backed bonds to permit PV, the people who want PV but can't afford, or rather can't qualify for other financing, don't have the money and don't have the credit scores to qualify. So is that going to change the recipe you just described? Is that going to open new possibilities, or is that just is that irrelevant to where the market's going?
You're asking specifically regarding the GEMS program?
Yeah.
Well, I believe that while it may make a difference at the margins, I'll say, it's my belief that the competitiveness of these third-party producers or third-party offerers of residential PV, the Sunruns, Solar City, SunPower, Vivint, that these companies have already been filling that niche as far as those homeowners who, for whatever reason, don't want to install a system using their money or go on and finance it themselves. So I can't see GEMS dramatically reshaping the playing field, because others have been in the field, so to speak, playing on that field over the past several years.
Yeah, right. When the market, the free market, works by itself, then there's no good reason for government to get into that. I had hoped this was going to be a campaign issue, at least at the gubernatorial level, but I haven't heard any candidates talk about it. Maybe it's too complex. Anyway, I wanted to ask you one last question, sort of a wrap-up, and we only have a minute left or so for the answer. Assuming that all the things, all the optimistic things that we think, you and me both, are going to happen as a result of the of HECO's response to these pending orders, assuming that it's really smart, creative, pull together kind of action they choose to take and ultimately are permitted to take, how is that going to affect the health, the vitality of the PV industry, local PV industry, and how is it going to, you think they'll spring back? You think the number of installations will, resume? You said before that you didn't think it would go back to 2012, but if I give you a really, good environment and I give you all the major problems somehow answered going forward, don't you think that PV will go much further in this state and will ultimately be the solution to clean energy? When accepting transportation, of course.
Go much further, yes, definitely. Being the solution to the state, no. I really do feel that it's going to be a diversity of sources with PV, wind, and other renewable energies that will be filling out the overall renewable energy pie. But there's certainly a lot more that can and will be done, and it's really a question of as HECO implements a new strategy and new techniques, new equipment to be able to incorporate more distributed generation rooftop PV. A key question is how long is that rollout going to take? How soon will these measures be implemented to be able to allow companies like mine and many others to be able to have less anxiety and more confidence that we're going to hopefully be in business in the years to come and not just in the
Okay,
short
Marco,
term.
we're about out of time. Sorry, but this is a question we should discuss in our next visitation, which we will. Marco Mangelsdorf, ProVision Solar. This is Think Tech Hawaii. We're talking about PV in Hawaii with Marco, as we like to do. Thank you so much, Marco.
I always look forward to your visitation, Jay.
The same, Marco. Aloha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.